But first up, he is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and author of Shortest Way Home, One Mayor's Challenge, and a model for America's future. Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Wow.
You're blowing up, man. You're blowing up.
Feels good.
Yeah, I bet you it does. Now, did I get the name close?
Yeah, close.
That's it. I read it's Boot Edge Edge.
You got it, Buttigieg. Yep. Just like it looks.
Let's call you Pete. Okay, so yeah, you are blowing up. I mean, wow. I must admit, a few months ago, I was just, who's this guy? Young.
That's fair.
I'm not going to ask you the age question because, first of all, I've heard you answer it now, and I don't think it's relevant. You're 37. I know people who, now, if you're 27, I would say yes, that's too young. I mean, legally, it's too young. But 30, I've known people who are 37, super mature. You're one of those people. I've known people who are 80 who are still idiots. People are humans, they're not numbers, correct? Yeah. And the same would apply to Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but why are you suddenly rising in the polls?
Well, I think part of it is that people are looking for something completely different. And, we're in this moment. I really believe that
I thought we got that.
Well, in a way, we did, right? I mean, each election in many ways produces somebody who's the reverse of what we just had.
True.
And you could argue that it doesn't get more different from this president than a laid-back, intellectual, young gay mayor from the Midwest.
No. You are right. I mean, we hear the stories about you, like you found a book you wanted to read, but it was not translated from the Norwegian, so you learned Norwegian. I don't know what Trump is, but you're the opposite of that. I mean, he's fat, you're thin, he's old, you're young. You went to Afghanistan, he dodged the draft, right? There's a lot of reasons.
We're very different people.
You're very different. So how do you beat him?
Well, I think that's part of the idea. I mean, look, the paradox here is in order to beat Trump, we got to run a campaign that's not all about Trump. The more it's about him, I think folks at home are going to be saying, okay, who's talking about me? Don't get me wrong, you got to punch back when you're punched, you got to correct lies when he tells lies, but then we got to move on very quickly to how our ideas actually cash out in everyday life, because when we do that, we win. Look at the political trajectory of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. In 2010, when I was first getting into elected politics, it was a toxic issue for Democrats. By 2018, it was the winning issue for Democrats.
Sure.
And I think the reason is people saw what it meant in their everyday lives. And we got to be willing to talk not just at the highest level about our values, but at the ground level about how following our values cashes out. And instead, a lot of the time we've been stuck at that middle level, which is about the policy designs, before we really win the day, either for the values that motivate those policies or for the results that come from those policies.
So you're still the mayor of South Bend, right?
That's right.
But are they mad at you because you're not there a lot now? Because, like, if you're a senator and you're running for president, no big deal because they don't do anything anyway. Look, but I hear you say, look, I am actually in charge of a city. I got to do stuff every day. What's going on with that?
Yeah, look, most people running for president have very demanding day jobs. And, the city of South Bend that is my day job. And people at home, thankfully, have
And you do tend to it?
Yeah, I have to. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm on
You're
the
in LA
hook
today.
for the
What
outcome.
if the sewer? What if the sewer's back up?
We got phones. We got,
Okay,
a lot of the work that I do obviously is guidance, policy, but also, one of the reasons I'll be on a red eye is to get back home quickly and tend to some things there.
So, okay, so you're from the part of the country that the Democrats desperately want to win back.
Right.
I don't know if Indiana will be in play. Used to be.
Yeah, that's right.
Could it be again?
I think it could be. It's not written in stone that these states have to be conservative. Matter of fact, there's a very deep progressive tradition in the industrial Midwest.
Okay, but, they used to ask this question after 9/11, why do they hate us? But I want to ask it about Republicans and their attitude toward Democrats.
Yeah.
Why do they hate us?
Well, I think...
Why is the D so toxic that we automatically write off 25 states?
Well, first of all, we got to look at the media diet, right? I mean, not only the Twitterverse, but if you're on a diet of Fox News and some of this conservative radio, you may literally never even hear our perspective. And I think there's an echo chamber. It's
That's
one of the
why you
reasons...
got to go on Fox News.
Yeah, which I was really surprised to discover. Yeah. I was the first out of the candidates to go on Fox News Sunday. But if I didn't, a lot of viewers would have never heard what I had to say. So I think we got to penetrate there. I also think sometimes there's a sense of condescension coming from our party, fairly or unfairly. I think a lot of people perceive that we're looking down on them. And if we allow that to continue, it's going to be a real problem. Look, if a wealthy, coastal, liberal professional goes up to a guy pumping gas in South Bend, maybe wearing one of those red hats, and said, you're voting against your economic interests. You know what that guy's going to say? He's going to say, so are you.
Or if he says you have white privilege.
Well,
that rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, look, white privilege is real, and we should talk about these issues. But we can't paint people into a corner where they have nowhere to go but the far right. That's how radicalization works. We need to invite them onto the right side of history. Not by, I mean, don't get me wrong. We're going to give no quarter to things like white nationalism that helped animate this presidency and this campaign. But I also think we have an obligation to be speaking to things like the loss in a sense of belonging. I mean, exactly the kind of thing that opens people up to radicalization, whether it's here at home or in places like the Middle East.
That's Brexit.
Yeah, exactly. And the same desire for belonging that might motivate an auto worker in the middle of his career who's finding himself disrupted by modernity, is also the sense of belonging that explains the fear of a dreamer who's afraid they might not belong in what they feel to be their own country, or a transgender kid in high school who just has to go to the bathroom like everybody else. I mean, if we get it right, then talking about this sense of belonging can actually knit us back together instead of watching it turn into something that makes us so vulnerable to being divided against each other.
You just said transgender going to the bathroom. How often does that really happen? Is that a real problem?
Well, if you're transgender, it happens several times a day.
What's that?
If it's you, right? I mean,
but does it happen that often that that's an issue?
Often enough that...
It's easy to make them applaud. I'm talking about the people who are going to elect the next president.
I think we just talk about it as how we take care of people.
I'm just saying, that you mentioned, you have like 8 minutes here.
Yeah.
And out of that, of all the things, you mentioned that thing. I'm saying, we're talking about how do we win back those people. Right. I don't know if that's the thing we want to accent. It may be a fair issue.
What we've got to do is we've got to paint a picture of life in the future that my generation's living into. It's one of the reasons I talk a lot about what the world will look like in 2054. That's the year I would get to the current age of the current president. And,
fuck.
Not to put too fine a point.
So you're a millennial.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. Now, I don't want to generalize, because I do shows all around the country. A lot of millennials come, and they know that this is not a safe space. So they're not all fragile.
Right.
But in general, they're fragile. And that is well, you don't think so?
I mean, this is the generation that provided the bulk of the troops in the wars after 9/11.
We're not talking about, that's how many percentage? We're talking about the people, I'm talking about people who need cry rooms and trigger warnings and safe spaces. Harvard had an issue a couple of weeks ago. Ronald Sullivan, he's a brilliant professor, he's a dean there, African-American, who is defending Harvey Weinstein. And there was a big protest. These are Harvard students who don't understand that everybody gets a lawyer in this country. They're saying, we don't want to get our diploma from someone who was this closely associated with violating the Me Too principles, no matter what his reasons, Harvard students don't understand.
Well, or maybe they just think that's the right place to protest what they see as going into the toleration of sexual harassment.
But isn't the principle that everyone gets a lawyer in America more important?
You can still have a lawyer, but then when he shows up, you can also raise your voice to protest what he represents. That's the whole idea of free speech and vigorous debate. I'm all for that. Look, I think...
I don't know if it's debatable that everybody gets a lawyer in America.
I agree everybody ought to get a lawyer. Sure.
Okay.
But the decision is, to what extent do you invite those people or appear to be conferring honor on them?
So let me ask you one final question. You've said that you think the left should reclaim faith.
Yeah.
That's curious to me. You're such an intellectual guy. I guess I never understand how faith mixes in with that. I always identify faith as the purposeful suspension of critical thinking.
Look.
And you're You're a brilliant critical thinker. How do you align that?
Look, I believe in reason, I believe in Enlightenment values, and I also believe that reason has limits. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think, especially in our party...
But using no reason is a better answer?
Look, maybe you think you got it all figured out.
No, no, I'm not saying that.
Good, neither do I. And
I don't know the answers, but when I don't know an answer, I don't make up a story about it.
I just think the important thing is to recognize that, like, God doesn't belong to a political party. I mean, some of these themes,
right.
God, freedom, patriotism, right? These are not things that that one party should be able to claim, but that's how it's worked out. We made it sound like the only way to apply, for example, religious values in politics would be through the lens of the religious right. When I go to church, what I hear a lot about is protecting the downtrodden and standing up for the immigrant and being skeptical of authority sometimes, and making sure you look after the poor and the prisoner. I mean, to me, that's the sort of thing that the religious left, often without much attention, has been arguing for my whole lifetime. The same with freedom. You know, this theme that we've allowed our conservative friends to monopolize, as if government were the only thing that could make you unfree. Mm-hmm. When the reality is, you know, your neighbor can make you unfree. Your cable company can make you unfree.
Being poor
absolutely
makes you very unfree.
Absolutely. So let's talk about freedom to, not just freedom from, and the way that you're free to start a small business if you have health care. The way that you're free to marry the person you love if the law of the land is that a county clerk can't impose their religion on you. So whether we're talking about faith, whether it's freedom, whether it's patriotism, I think we need to assert that often those very values can point us in our progressive direction and that no party ought to have a monopoly on them.
Mayor Pete, thank you very much. Good luck with your campaign. Not that you need it. All right, Mayor Pete Buttigieg.